My wife calls me her rock. Turns out she meant the one she'd throw through her own window. I'm Miles Harren, 38 years old, and I design buildings for a living. Ironic, considering my own house is falling apart. Not structurally, though the kitchen renovation has been stalled for 3 months, but in ways that matter more than load-bearing walls and proper drainage. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I was sketching preliminary designs for a downtown office complex when Tessa breezed through my home office, trailing expensive perfume and checking her phone for the 15th time in 10 minutes. "Working late again tonight," she announced without looking up. "Client meeting." I glanced at her reflection in my computer monitor. Designer jeans, silk blouse, hair styled like she was heading to a photo shoot instead of discussing fabric samples. "Which client?" "The Morrison project. You know, the penthouse renovation?" I didn't know. Tessa ran her interior design business with the secrecy of a government agency. After 12 years of marriage, I knew more about the structural integrity of concrete than I did about her daily schedule. "Need me to pick up Nora from school?" "Already arranged." She paused at the doorway, finally meeting my eyes. "Don't wait up." The click of her heels faded down the hallway, followed by the slam of our front door. Through my office window, I watched her climb into her white BMW, a car we couldn't really afford, financed through her business account. I returned to my sketches, but concentration proved impossible. Something felt off, like when you're reviewing blueprints and can't pinpoint the error, but you know it's there. The Morrison project rang no bells, and I'd helped Tessa with enough proposals to recognize most of her client names. My phone buzzed. Text from Neil, my best friend and owner of Murphy's Tavern downtown. "Lunch today? Got gossip that'll curl your architect hair." Neil's gossip usually involved which city councilman was skimming construction permits or which contractor was cutting corners on foundation work. As someone who'd spent 15 years designing buildings in this Rust Belt city, I appreciated staying informed about local corruption. I met him at Murphy's around noon. The place smelled like grilled onions and decades of cigarette smoke. Despite the city smoking ban, Neil was wiping down glasses behind the bar, his perpetual scowl softening when he spotted me. "Miles, my favorite building designer. How's domestic life?" "Same as always. Tessa's busy, I'm busy, Nora's growing too fast." Neil poured me a coffee without asking. "Speaking of Tessa, a funny thing happened yesterday. She was in here with that contractor, Rowan Eldridge. You know him?" I knew of him. Rowan Eldridge drove a modified Ford Raptor with custom paint and chrome details that probably cost more than my annual salary. He specialized in high-end renovations and had a reputation for flashy work and even flashier self-promotion. What were they discussing? Couldn't hear much, but they seemed pretty cozy. Lots of whispering, lots of smiling. She was showing him papers, looked like blueprints or plans. My coffee suddenly tasted bitter. Probably collaborating on a project. Neil's expression suggested he wasn't buying my casual tone. Maybe. Just seemed odd, you know? The way they were sitting close, her touching his arm when she laughed. I wanted to dismiss Neil's observation as typical bar owner paranoia, but the uncomfortable feeling in my chest disagreed. Tessa had mentioned working with new contractors lately, expanding her business network. Rowan Eldridge would fit that description. "Thanks for the heads up." "Probably nothing," Neil said, but his eyes conveyed the opposite message. I spent the afternoon distracted, making 3 errors on a structural calculation that normally took me 20 minutes. By evening, I was analyzing every interaction with Tessa from the past few months, searching for patterns I might have missed. She arrived home after 10, claiming the client meeting had included dinner. Her explanation felt rehearsed, delivered while she avoided eye contact and immediately busied herself with sorting mail. "How was your day?" she asked, the question automatic. "Fine. Neil mentioned seeing you at Murphy's yesterday." Tessa's hand stilled on a credit card statement. "Oh, right. I met with Rowan Eldridge about a potential collaboration." "What kind of collaboration?" "He's looking for design input on some upcoming projects. Could be good for business." Her answer sounded reasonable, but something in her tone reminded me of how she spoke to Nora when explaining why vegetables were important. Technically truthful, but strategically incomplete. Over the next week, I paid closer attention. Tessa's phone habits had changed. She kept it face down during dinner, took calls in other rooms, and checked messages with the focused intensity of someone expecting important news. Her work schedule became increasingly erratic, with more evening meetings and weekend consultations. The breakthrough came by accident. Tessa had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while showering, and I needed to check my email quickly. Her browser displayed her inbox, and one subject line caught my attention. "Meeting confirmation, the penthouse." I shouldn't have clicked it. 12 years of marriage should have earned her the benefit of doubt. But architects are trained to investigate structural problems, and my marriage was showing signs of serious foundation issues. The email was from someone signed R and contained an address for a boutique hotel downtown. The message was brief. Looking forward to tonight. Usual room. My hands trembled as I forwarded the email to my personal account, then deleted it from her sent folder. The timestamp showed it was sent 3 days ago, the same night she'd claimed to be meeting with the Morrison project client. I closed the laptop and sat in our half-renovated kitchen, surrounded by exposed drywall and unfinished cabinet installations. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. Our home looked exactly like our marriage felt. That evening, I called Neil. "I need a favor," I said. "Can you recommend a good private investigator?" "Jesus, Miles, you sure about this?" "No, but I need to know." "Skip the PI for now. You want answers? Follow her yourself. Less expensive, more immediate." Neil was right. If Tessa was meeting someone at that hotel, I could confirm it tonight. She'd already announced another late client meeting, her third this week. At 8:30, I parked across the street from our house and waited. Tessa's BMW emerged from our driveway 20 minutes later. I followed at a distance, my heart hammering against my ribs. She didn't drive to any office building or client residence. Instead, she pulled into the parking lot of the Grandview Hotel, the boutique place mentioned in the email. I watched from behind a delivery truck as she walked toward the entrance, her posture confident and familiar, like someone who'd made this trip before. 5 minutes later, Rowan Eldridge's modified Raptor rumbled into the lot. He parked near the entrance and jogged toward the building, checking his watch. I sat in my car for 30 minutes, staring at the hotel's lit windows and trying to convince myself there was an innocent explanation. Maybe they really were discussing business, maybe the hotel had a restaurant or conference room, but I knew better. Architects learn to trust their instincts about structural integrity. When something feels wrong, it usually is. I drove home and waited in the dark kitchen, surrounded by our unfinished renovation. Tessa returned just after midnight, humming softly as she hung up her coat. "How was the meeting?" I asked from the shadows. She jumped, pressing a hand to her chest. "You scared me. Why are you sitting in the dark?" "Couldn't sleep. How was the Morrison project?" "Good. Productive. We made real progress on the design concepts." I wanted to ask about the hotel, about Rowan Eldridge, about why her meeting had lasted until midnight. Instead, I nodded and headed upstairs, leaving her alone with her lies. In our bedroom, I stared at the ceiling and tried to process what I'd witnessed. My wife was having an affair. The woman I'd loved for 12 years, the mother of my daughter, was meeting another man at a hotel while I sat home reviewing blueprints and worrying about mortgage payments. But beneath the hurt and anger, another emotion was building: curiosity. As an architect, I was trained to understand how things worked, how they fit together, how they could be taken apart. My marriage was collapsing, but I wanted to understand the engineering behind its destruction. I pulled out my phone and started a voice memo, speaking quietly into the darkness. Day 1 of documentation. Tessa met Rowan Eldridge at the Grandview Hotel. Meeting lasted approximately 3 hours. She lied about the location and nature of the meeting. Need more information about timeline, frequency, and scope of relationship. I always thought I'd catch her faking it in bed. I didn't know she'd fake our whole life. The next morning, I approached my marriage like a construction project requiring detailed inspection. Every successful building starts with understanding the existing conditions, identifying problems, and developing solutions. My domestic situation needed the same systematic analysis. I started with digital forensics. While Tessa showered, I accessed her laptop using a password recovery technique I'd learned during a computer-aided design course. Her browser history revealed a pattern of deleted entries, but the cache files told a different story. The Grandview Hotel website appeared in her search history 17 times over the past 2 months. Rowan Eldridge's construction company website showed up even more frequently. Most interesting were the searches for interior design collaboration contracts and business partnership agreements. I forwarded the relevant browser data to my email and cleared my digital tracks. If Tessa was planning something beyond a simple affair, I needed documentation. My phone rang as I was reviewing the evidence. The caller ID showed my attorney, Marcus Webb. "Miles, I've got interesting news about that Eldridge construction inquiry you asked about." I'd requested a background check on Rowan's business practices, claiming I was considering him for a project collaboration. The lie felt appropriate, given the circumstances. "What did you find?" "Eldridge has been aggressive about pursuing city contracts lately. He's submitted bids for 3 major projects this quarter, including the downtown office complex you're designing." My stomach dropped. The downtown project was my biggest commission in 5 years. a potential career-defining opportunity. I'd spent months developing innovative structural solutions and sustainable design elements. How would he know about my design specifications? That's the interesting part. His proposals include architectural details that match your preliminary submissions. Someone gave him inside information. I thanked Marcus and hung up, my mind racing. Tessa had access to all my project files. She'd helped me organize proposals, reviewed my presentations, and knew every detail of my current work. If she was sharing that information with Rowan, the implications were staggering. This wasn't just an affair, it was industrial sabotage. I needed proof. That evening, I told Tessa I was working late at the office, then drove to the Grandview Hotel. If they maintained a regular schedule, I might be able to document their meetings. I parked in the shadows near the hotel's side entrance and waited. At 9:15, Tessa's BMW pulled into the lot. She walked quickly toward the building, checking her phone. Rowan arrived 10 minutes later, carrying a leather portfolio that looked suspiciously like the ones architects used for client presentations. I waited another hour, then approached the hotel building. The side entrance led to a small courtyard with windows facing the parking area. One second-floor window was partially open, and voices drifted down through the night air. I positioned myself beneath the window and activated my phone's voice recording app. "The structural innovations are brilliant," Rowan was saying. Miles really outdid himself with the foundation design. "He's always been creative," Tessa replied. "Too bad he's terrible at business development." "Lucky for us. These specifications will guarantee we win the city contract." "What about the timeline?" "I'll submit the bid next week. By the time Miles realizes what happened, we'll have signed contracts and down payments." My hands shook as I held the phone steady. They were discussing my work like it belonged to them, planning to steal months of development and research. "I feel bad about this sometimes," Tessa continued. "We've been married 12 years. You said yourself the marriage was over. This just makes the transition easier." "I know. It's just he trusts me completely. Never questions where I go or what I'm doing." Rowan laughed. "That's what makes this so simple. Miles is a brilliant architect but a terrible detective." I wanted to burst through the window and confront them both, but I forced myself to remain hidden. This recording was evidence, and I needed more before taking action. "Speaking of trust," Tessa said, "I transferred another $50,000 from his business account today. He'll notice eventually, but by then we'll be ready to launch our own firm." "How much total?" "Almost $340,000. Enough to get started, plus what you're bringing from your end." I nearly dropped the phone. $340,000 represented years of careful savings, money I'd set aside for Nora's college fund and our retirement. Tessa had been systematically draining our accounts while planning her escape. "What about the kid?" Rowan asked. "Nora stays with me, obviously. Miles won't fight it. He's too passive. Besides, I have leverage." "What kind of leverage?" "Let's just say Miles might not be Nora's biological father. I never told him about the timing with my ex-boyfriend." The world tilted sideways. Nora, my 4-year-old daughter with Tessa's green eyes and my stubborn chin, might not be mine genetically. The possibility had never occurred to me because Tessa had insisted on trying for children immediately after our marriage. I forced myself to keep recording as they discussed logistics for their business partnership and timeline for leaving their respective spouses. By the time I returned to my car, I had 47 minutes of detailed conversation about theft, fraud, and betrayal. The drive home passed in a blur. I parked in our driveway and sat in the darkness, trying to process everything I'd learned. My wife wasn't just having an affair, she was orchestrating the complete destruction of my professional and personal life. But she'd made one critical error. She'd underestimated my ability to gather information and analyze problems. Tessa saw me as passive and trusting, someone who would accept whatever story she provided. She was wrong. I spent the rest of the night researching legal options and planning my response. By morning, I had a preliminary strategy that would address the theft, the affair, and the business sabotage. First, I needed to secure my remaining assets and protect my intellectual property. Second, I required legal documentation of Tessa's activities. Third, I wanted answers about Nora's paternity. I called Marcus Webb at 7 a.m. "I need an emergency consultation," I told him, "and I need to hire a forensic accountant." "What's the situation?" "My wife is stealing my business designs and draining my accounts to fund an affair with a competitor." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Can you prove it?" "I have recordings, financial records, and documented evidence of intellectual property theft." "Bring everything to my office this afternoon. And Miles, don't confront your wife until we've secured your legal position." The hardest part was maintaining normal behavior around Tessa. She made coffee and small talk while I ate breakfast, discussing plans for Nora's upcoming birthday party and asking about my work schedule. "Any progress on the downtown project?" she asked casually. "Still refining the structural details," I replied, watching her face for reactions. "I'm sure you'll figure it out. You always do." Her confidence felt different now, less supportive, more predatory. She knew exactly how I'd figure it out, because she was planning to steal the solution. That afternoon, I met with Marcus and laid out everything I'd discovered. He reviewed the recordings, financial records, and evidence of design theft with the focused attention of someone calculating billable hours. "This is comprehensive," he said finally. "We can pursue criminal charges for the financial theft and civil action for the intellectual property violations. What about the marriage? With this evidence, we can invoke the prenuptial agreement's fraud clause. Material misrepresentation voids her claim to shared assets." I'd insisted on a prenuptial agreement despite Tessa's objections, mainly because my father had lost everything in his divorce. The contract included specific language about deception and financial misconduct. "How long before we can take action?" "Give me 48 hours to prepare the paperwork. In the meantime, document everything and avoid confrontation." I left Marcus's office feeling something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. Tessa had been planning my destruction, but she'd provided me with the tools for her own downfall. That evening, she announced another late meeting. "Client dinner," she explained. "Might be very late." "Of course," I said. "I'll handle Nora's bedtime." After Tessa left, I tucked my daughter into bed and read her favorite story about a princess who saved herself. Nora fell asleep holding my hand, her small fingers wrapped around mine with complete trust. Whatever the paternity results revealed, she was my daughter in every way that mattered. But I needed to know the truth, if only to understand the full scope of Tessa's deception. I ordered a discreet DNA testing kit online, expedited shipping. The next morning, I received a call that changed everything. "Miles, this is Jennifer Chen from the City Development Board. We need to discuss the downtown office project." "What's the problem?" "We received a bid from Eldridge Construction that includes design specifications remarkably similar to your preliminary submissions. We're concerned about potential intellectual property violations." My heart raced. "What kind of specifications?" "Structural innovations, sustainable design elements, even specific material recommendations. Either you're collaborating with Mr. Eldridge, or someone has access to your proprietary work." "I'm not collaborating with Eldridge Construction." "Then we have a serious problem. Can you come in this afternoon to review the competing proposals?" I arrived at City Hall with copies of my original designs and timestamps proving their development. Jennifer Chen, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, spread both proposals across her conference table. The similarities were undeniable. Rowan had copied my structural innovations exactly, down to the specific steel specifications and foundation design. He'd even stolen my sustainability features, including a rainwater collection system I'd spent weeks perfecting. "This is blatant theft," Jennifer said. "How would Mr. Eldridge have access to your work?" I could have mentioned Tessa's involvement, but I wanted to handle that privately. "I'm investigating possible security breaches in my office." "We'll postpone the bid review pending your investigation. If you can prove intellectual property theft, we'll disqualify Eldridge Construction and pursue legal action." Driving home, I realized Tessa's plan was unraveling faster than she'd anticipated. The city had noticed the design similarities, which meant Rowan's bid was compromised. When Tessa learned about the postponement, she'd know something was wrong. I needed to accelerate my timeline. That evening, I confronted reality. My wife had been systematically destroying my life while pretending to love me. She'd stolen my money, my work, and possibly even lied about my daughter's parentage. But she'd made one crucial miscalculation. She'd assumed I would remain passive and trusting until it was too late to fight back. Tomorrow, she'd learn exactly how wrong she was. I woke up Thursday morning with the clarity that comes from finally understanding a problem's true scope. Tessa was in the shower, humming the same song she'd been humming for weeks, probably something Rowan had introduced her to. The sound made my skin crawl. The DNA testing kit had arrived via overnight delivery. I collected the sample from Nora's toothbrush while she ate breakfast, my hand steady despite the magnitude of what I was doing. Whatever the results revealed, I needed the truth. "Daddy, why do you look sad?" Nora asked, syrup covering her chin. "Just thinking about work, sweetheart." "Mommy says thinking too much gives you wrinkles." "Mommy says a lot of things." Tessa entered the kitchen dressed for another day of deception. Designer clothes, perfect makeup, phone already in hand. She kissed Nora's forehead and barely glanced in my direction. "Late meeting again tonight," she announced. "The Morrison project is reaching a critical phase." I almost laughed. The Morrison project had become her cover story for everything. A fictional client that justified any schedule or behavior. If she was going to lie, she could at least be creative about it. Which phase specifically? I asked. Final design approval. Very technical stuff. I'd be happy to review the plans if you need a second opinion. Tessa's pause lasted a fraction too long. That's sweet, but the client prefers to work exclusively with interior designers. Of course they do. After she left, I called Marcus Webb with an update about the city's investigation. He'd prepared preliminary paperwork for asset protection and had scheduled a meeting with the forensic accountant for this afternoon. We're moving faster than anticipated, he said. Are you ready for the confrontation? I've been ready for weeks. I just didn't know it. The forensic accountant, a precise woman named Patricia Moore, had spent 2 days analyzing our financial records. Her findings were devastating and thorough. Your wife has systematically transferred funds from your business account to a joint investment fund, then moved that money to an account controlled solely by Rowan Eldridge, she explained. The total amount is $347,000. Over what time frame? 18 months, small amounts initially, larger transfers in recent weeks. She's been careful to stay below the reporting thresholds that would trigger automatic bank notifications. Patricia showed me transaction records, account statements, and a timeline that painted a clear picture of financial fraud. Tessa hadn't just stolen impulsively, she'd planned and executed a sophisticated theft operation. The good news is that we can trace every transaction, Patricia continued. The bad news is that recovering the money will require legal action and cooperation from Mr. Eldridge. What about criminal charges? Possible, but complex given your marriage and her access to the accounts. Civil recovery might be more effective. I thanked Patricia and spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for the evening's confrontation. Marcus had advised against direct confrontation, but I needed answers that only Tessa could provide. At 6 p.m., I was sitting in our kitchen when Tessa arrived home, earlier than usual and looking agitated. We need to talk, she said without preamble. About what? Rowan called this afternoon. The city postponed the bid review for the downtown project. They're investigating possible design theft. I kept my expression neutral. That sounds serious. Miles, I need to ask you something directly. Have you been monitoring my activities? The question caught me off guard. I'd expected her to maintain the deception longer, to keep pretending everything was normal while she figured out damage control. What kind of activities? Don't play games. Someone told the city about the design similarities. Someone has been watching us. Us? Tessa's composure cracked slightly. Me and Rowan. Our business collaboration. Is that what you're calling it? She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact instant she realized I knew everything. Her shoulders sagged, her perfect posture dissolving into defeat. How long have you known? She asked quietly. About the affair? 2 weeks. About the theft? 3 days. About the business sabotage? Since yesterday. I never meant for it to go this far. Which part? The cheating, the stealing, or the lying about our daughter's paternity? Tessa's face went white. You recorded us. I documented criminal activity. There's a difference. She sat down across from me, her hands shaking. For the first time in months, she looked genuinely vulnerable instead of performatively emotional. I can explain everything, she said. I'm listening. The marriage has been over for years, Miles. We both know it. We're roommates who happen to share a child. So you decided to steal my work and drain my accounts? I decided to build a future. Rowan and I have real chemistry, real partnership potential. We could create something amazing together. Using my money and my designs. You would never have taken the risk. You're too cautious, too afraid of failure. I almost admired her ability to rationalize theft as entrepreneurship. Almost. What about Nora? Tessa's mask slipped completely. What about her? Is she my daughter? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Tessa looked at her hands, at the walls, anywhere except my face. I don't know, she whispered finally. You don't know, or you don't want to tell me? The timing was complicated. I was still seeing David when we got married. The pregnancy happened faster than I expected. David, her college boyfriend, the one she'd claimed to break up with months before our wedding. Another lie in a relationship built on deception. So for 4 years, you've let me believe Nora was mine while knowing she might not be? You love her. Biology doesn't change that. She was right, but that wasn't the point. The point was that every major decision in our marriage had been based on information she'd deliberately withheld or falsified. I want you to leave, I said. Miles, please, we can work through this. Leave tonight. Stay at your mother's. Stay with Rowan. I don't care. But get out of my house. You can't throw me out. This is my home, too. I pulled out my phone and played 30 seconds of the recording from the hotel window. Her voice filled the kitchen, discussing my money and my designs like they belonged to her. I faked every moment with you, she screamed, her composure finally shattering completely. Every smile, every laugh, every time I said I loved you. None of it was real. I stopped the recording and looked at her calmly. I didn't fake the divorce papers I filed this morning. Your tears are finally real. Tessa stared at me in shock. You filed for divorce? Emergency petition citing fraud, theft, and material misrepresentation. Marcus Webb has documentation of everything. The affair, the financial theft, the intellectual property violations. What about Nora? I'm requesting full custody pending paternity testing. If she's mine biologically, you'll have supervised visitation until the criminal charges are resolved. If she's not mine, I'm requesting adoption rights. You can't do this. I already did. Tessa stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You think you're so smart, don't you? Recording conversations, hiring lawyers, playing detective. Smarter than you thought, apparently. This isn't over, Miles. I know things about you, about your business practices, about what? My honest tax returns? My legitimate client relationships? My complete lack of criminal activity? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. We both knew she had no leverage because I'd never given her any. While she'd been building a foundation of lies, I'd been living transparently. I'll pack some things, she said finally. Take whatever you need, but leave the business documents and financial records. What financial records? The ones you've been hiding in your office closet. Patricia Moore will be here tomorrow morning with a court order to examine them. Tessa's face went through several emotions: surprise, anger, fear, and finally resignation. She'd been outmaneuvered, and she knew it. I watched her pack 2 suitcases with mechanical efficiency, her movements sharp and angry. When she finished, she stood in our bedroom doorway looking around like she was memorizing details. I did love you once, she said, in the beginning. I believe you. That's what makes this so much worse. She left without saying goodbye to Nora, who was spending the night at her friend's house. I heard the BMW start in the driveway, then drive away into the darkness. I sat alone in our half-renovated kitchen, surrounded by exposed drywall and unfinished projects. But for the first time in months, the house felt peaceful instead of broken. My phone buzzed with a text from Neil. Heard through the grapevine that Tessa's been staying at the Grandview Hotel. Want to talk? I typed back, she won't be staying there anymore. The next morning, Patricia Moore arrived with a court-ordered accountant and 2 boxes of evidence bags. They spent 3 hours photographing documents, copying hard drives, and cataloging financial records that Tessa had tried to hide. This is more comprehensive than we expected, Patricia told me. She documented everything: transfers, meetings with Eldridge, even timeline notes for leaving you. Why would she keep records of criminal activity? Probably planning to use them against Eldridge if their partnership went bad. She wanted leverage over everyone. By noon, we had enough evidence to support criminal charges, civil asset recovery, and complete dissolution of the marriage. Tessa's careful planning had become the instrument of her own destruction. My phone rang just after lunch. The caller ID showed Rowan Eldridge. We need to talk, he said without preamble. About what? About calling off your lawyers and settling this privately. I'm listening. Meet me at Murphy's Tavern in an hour. Come alone. I almost laughed. Rowan still thought he could intimidate or negotiate his way out of criminal liability. He was about to learn otherwise. I'll be there, I said. It was time to finish what Tessa had started. Murphy's Tavern at 3 p.m. on a Friday afternoon was nearly empty, except for Neil behind the bar and 2 regulars nursing beers in the corner booth. I arrived early and positioned myself where I could see the entrance, my phone set to record whatever conversation Rowan had planned. He walked in 10 minutes later, his usual swagger replaced by the nervous energy of someone whose world was collapsing. The custom Ford Raptor in the parking lot looked freshly washed, like he'd been stress cleaning instead of sleeping. Miles, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. Thanks for coming. What do you want, Rowan? To fix the situation before it gets out of hand. Neil appeared with 2 coffees, his expression carefully neutral. He'd known about this meeting since morning and had promised to stay close in case things escalated. Define fix, I said. Look, I know how this appears, but the business collaboration with Tessa was legitimate. We were planning to form a design-build partnership, combining her interior expertise with my construction experience, using my architectural innovations and my money. The money was hers to invest. You're married. Shared assets, shared decisions. I pulled out my phone and played a 15-second clip from the hotel recording. Tessa's voice discussing how I'd never noticed the missing funds because I was terrible at business development. Rowan's confidence visibly deflated. You recorded us. I documented criminal conspiracy. There's a difference. What do you want? Full restitution of stolen funds, public acknowledgement of intellectual property theft, and your withdrawal from all city contract competitions for the next 5 years. That would destroy my business. You should have considered that before stealing my designs. Rowan leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. You don't understand the full situation. Tessa told me things about you, about your business practices. She has documentation. Of what? My legitimate tax returns? My honest client relationships? She said you've been skimming money from project budgets, inflating costs, and pocketing the difference. I almost laughed. Tessa was still trying to create leverage through fabricated accusations. Show me the documentation. She has copies of altered invoices, emails discussing cost inflation, evidence of bid manipulation. Rowan, I'm going to explain something very simple. Tessa has been lying to both of us for over a year. She told me you were just a business contact. She told you I was a corrupt architect. Neither story was true. His expression shifted as the implications sank in. You're saying she manipulated both of us? I'm saying she's a sociopath who saw opportunities and exploited them. The question is whether you're a willing criminal partner or another victim. Rowan stared into his coffee for a long moment. When he looked up, the bravado was completely gone. She approached me 6 months ago with a proposal for collaboration. Said her husband was holding her back professionally, that you were risk-averse and controlling. What did she offer you? Access to architectural expertise, interior design services, and initial capital for joint projects. She made it sound like a standard business partnership. When did it become personal? The affair started about 3 months ago. She said the marriage was over, that you were just roommates staying together for the kid. I'd heard variations of this story before. The unhappy wife, the controlling husband, the relationship that was already over before the affair began. It was a classic narrative that justified betrayal by reframing it as liberation. Did you know she was stealing my designs? She said you'd agreed to contribute architectural services to our partnership. I thought the design sharing was legitimate. And the money? Rowan's silence answered the question. He'd known the financial transfers were questionable, but he'd chosen not to ask difficult questions. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to return every dollar you received from Tessa, along with interest and penalties. You're going to provide written testimony about the intellectual property theft, and you're going to stay away from my family. And if I refuse? Criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and professional destruction. Your contractor's license will be revoked, your business reputation will be ruined, and you'll spend the next decade in legal battles. You're bluffing. I showed him photographs of the financial records Patricia Moore had discovered, along with screenshots of the email evidence Marcus Webb had compiled. I have documentation of every crime you've committed. The question is whether you want to cooperate or fight. Rowan studied the evidence with the expression of someone calculating odds and finding them unfavorable. What about Tessa? What about her? If I cooperate, what happens to her? That depends on her cooperation. But Rowan, she's not your problem anymore. She's not anyone's problem except her own. He nodded slowly. I'll need a few days to liquidate assets and gather the funds. You have 48 hours. After that, the criminal charges proceed regardless of restitution. We shook hands with the formality of a business transaction, which in many ways it was. Rowan was cutting his losses and minimizing damage, while I was recovering stolen assets and protecting my professional reputation. After he left, Neil brought me another coffee and sat down across from me. How do you feel? He asked. Like I've been living someone else's life for the past year. What's next? Divorce proceedings, custody arrangements, rebuilding my business reputation. And Nora? That was the question I'd been avoiding. The DNA test results would arrive next week, and depending on what they revealed, my relationship with my daughter might change fundamentally. Whatever happens, she's still my kid. Biology doesn't change 4 years of bedtime stories and scraped knee bandages. Neil nodded approvingly. You're handling this better than most people would. I don't have a choice. Falling apart won't solve anything. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Webb. Tessa wants to negotiate. Can you meet at my office Monday morning? I showed Neil the message. Think she's ready to cooperate? Think she's ready to minimize her criminal exposure. There's a difference. That weekend, I spent time with Nora while trying to maintain normal routines. She asked about Mommy's absence, and I explained that Mommy was staying at Grandma's house for a few days while we worked out some grown-up problems. "Are you and Mommy getting divorced?" she asked, with the directness that 4-year-olds use to cut through adult euphemisms. "We're having some serious problems, sweetheart. But whatever happens between Mommy and me, we both love you very much. Tommy's parents got divorced, and now he has 2 bedrooms. Would that bother you?" Nora considered the question with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "Not if I still get to live with you." Sunday evening, I received an unexpected visitor. Tessa's mother, Veda Koren, appeared at my front door carrying a casserole and wearing the expression of someone preparing for battle. "We need to discuss this situation," she announced, pushing past me into the foyer. Veda was 61 years old and had spent the past 12 years treating me like a disappointing employee who might be promoted if he showed sufficient improvement. She'd never forgiven me for not being wealthy, successful, or ambitious enough for her daughter. "What situation?" I asked. "This vindictive legal action you're taking against Tessa." "I'm responding to theft, fraud, and adultery. There's nothing vindictive about protecting myself." "Tessa made some mistakes, but destroying her life won't solve anything." I led Veda to the living room, where she perched on the edge of our couch like a bird preparing for flight. "What mistakes specifically?" "The affair was wrong, obviously, but the business arrangement with Rowan was legitimate." "The business arrangement involved stealing my designs and my money." "Tessa said you'd agreed to contribute to their partnership." "Tessa lied. She's been lying to everyone, including you." Veda's expression suggested she was beginning to understand the scope of her daughter's deception. "What do you want from her?" "Full financial restitution, honest testimony in the divorce proceedings, and a custody arrangement that prioritizes Nora's well-being." "And if she cooperates?" "I'll recommend minimal criminal charges and private resolution of the civil matters." "You'd destroy the mother of your child over money." "I'd protect my daughter from a mother who's demonstrated complete disregard for honesty, stability, and family loyalty." Veda was quiet for several minutes, processing information that contradicted everything Tessa had told her. "She said you were controlling and emotionally abusive." "Did she provide any examples?" "She said you monitored her spending, questioned her schedule, and threatened her when she tried to assert independence." "I monitored our joint accounts after noticing unexplained withdrawals. I questioned her schedule after discovering lies about her activities. I never threatened her, but I did document her criminal behavior." "You recorded private conversations?" "I recorded criminal conspiracy. If Tessa and Rowan had been planning legitimate business activities, they wouldn't have needed secret meetings at hotels." Veda stood up abruptly, her composure finally cracking. "This is my fault. I encouraged her to be more assertive, to stop letting you make all the decisions." "You encouraged her to commit crimes?" "I encouraged her to take control of her life. I didn't know about the theft or the extent of the deception." "What did you know?" "I knew about the affair. I thought it might give her the confidence to leave an unhappy marriage." The admission hung between us like a confession. Veda had been complicit in the betrayal, even if she hadn't understood its full scope. "Mrs. Koren, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need an honest answer. Did Tessa ever discuss Nora's paternity with you?" Veda's face went white. "What do you mean?" "Did she ever suggest that I might not be Nora's biological father?" The silence stretched for nearly a minute. When Veda finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "She mentioned that the timing of the pregnancy was uncertain, but she said it didn't matter because you were committed to being a father." "When did she mention this?" "Right after Nora was born. She was emotional, probably just postpartum anxiety." "Has she mentioned it since?" "Not directly, but sometimes when she was frustrated with you, she'd make comments about how you'd feel differently if you knew the truth." I thanked Veda for her honesty and walked her to the door. After she left, I sat in my living room and tried to process the implications of what she'd revealed. Tessa hadn't just lied about Nora's paternity. She'd been using it as emotional leverage for years, threatening disclosure whenever she felt constrained by marriage or family responsibilities. Monday morning, I met with Marcus Webb to prepare for negotiations with Tessa. He'd received preliminary offers from her attorney, and they were exactly what I'd expected: minimal financial restitution in exchange for reduced charges and shared custody. "She's still trying to negotiate from a position of strength," Marcus explained. "Her attorney believes the affair and financial issues can be characterized as marital problems rather than criminal behavior." "What's our response?" "We present the complete evidence package and explain that cooperation will determine whether she faces criminal charges or civil penalties." At 10 a.m., Tessa arrived at Marcus's office with her attorney. a sharp-dressed woman named Rebecca Torres, who specialized in high-conflict divorce cases. Tessa looked exhausted, her usual polish replaced by the disheveled appearance of someone who hadn't been sleeping. "Miles," she said quietly as we took our seats around the conference table. "Tessa." Rebecca Torres opened with a prepared statement about mutual responsibility, irreconcilable differences, and the importance of prioritizing Nora's well-being. It was a standard opening designed to frame the situation as a typical divorce rather than a criminal matter. Marcus responded by playing selected portions of the hotel recordings, displaying financial evidence, and presenting documentation of intellectual property theft. The presentation lasted 20 minutes and left no doubt about the scope of Tessa's criminal behavior. "My client is prepared to make a comprehensive settlement offer," Rebecca said when Marcus finished. "We're listening," I replied. "Full restitution of disputed funds, acknowledgement of business relationship errors, and joint custody with primary residence determined by Nora's preferences." "What about the intellectual property theft?" My client was unaware that the design sharing violated any agreements. I looked directly at Tessa. "Do you want to maintain that position under oath?" Tessa's composure cracked slightly. "I thought the collaboration was legitimate." "Even when you discussed stealing my blueprints and sabotaging my business?" "I never used those words." Marcus played a 30-second clip from the hotel recording where Tessa explicitly discussed taking Miles's designs and making sure he doesn't win the city contract. The room fell silent. Rebecca Torres looked like an attorney who just realized her client had lied about everything. "We'll need to discuss revised terms," Rebecca said finally. "You have until end of business today," Marcus replied. "After that, we proceed with criminal charges." As we prepared to leave, Tessa asked to speak with me privately. Marcus and Rebecca stepped outside, leaving us alone in the conference room. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am genuinely sorry." "For which part?" "All of it. The affair, the theft, the lies about Nora." "Why did you do it?" Tessa was quiet for a long moment. "Because I felt trapped. The marriage, the routine, the financial stress. I felt like I was disappearing. So you decided to disappear me instead. I convinced myself that you'd be better off without me, that everyone would be better off. Do you believe that now?" "I believe I destroyed something that could have been repaired with honesty and effort." "Yes, you did." That afternoon, Rebecca Torres called Marcus with a revised settlement offer: complete financial restitution, written acknowledgement of intellectual property violations, testimony against Rowan Eldridge, and supervised visitation pending resolution of custody issues. "What about criminal charges?" Marcus asked. "My client will plead guilty to misdemeanor theft and accept probation in lieu of jail time." "Accepted. We'll have papers ready tomorrow morning." I spent that evening in Nora's bedroom, reading stories and trying to prepare for whatever the DNA results might reveal. She fell asleep holding my hand, her breathing soft and steady in the darkness. The next morning, I received an envelope from the DNA testing laboratory. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by our still unfinished renovation, and opened the results that would determine the next chapter of my life. The test confirmed what my heart had known all along. Nora was my daughter, genetically and in every other way that mattered. But the relief was mixed with anger at Tessa for using our child as a weapon, for threatening the foundation of my relationship with Nora whenever she felt constrained by marriage or family responsibilities. Some betrayals cut so deep that forgiveness becomes impossible. Tessa had crossed that line months ago, and no amount of apology or restitution could repair the damage. I called Marcus Webb with the DNA results and instructions to proceed with full custody proceedings. Then I called Neil to share the news. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I can finally start rebuilding." "What's first?" "Finishing the kitchen renovation. Nora and I are going to need a proper home." That afternoon, I picked up Nora from preschool and told her that Mommy would be living somewhere else, but that she'd still see her regularly. "Are you sad, Daddy?" "A little, but I'm also excited about all the adventures we're going to have together." "Can we paint my room purple?" "We can paint your room any color you want." 6 months later, our house was completely renovated, my business reputation was restored, and Nora had adjusted to our new routine with the resilience that children possess. Tessa had moved to another city with Rowan, who'd lost his contractor's license but found work with a national construction company. I never spoke to Tessa again after the divorce was finalized. Some bridges, once burned, should stay destroyed. But every evening, when Nora and I sat in our finished kitchen eating dinner and discussing her day, I felt grateful for the destruction that had led to reconstruction. Sometimes you have to tear